everybody, it's TheSketchMonkey here and welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about the Ferrari SF90 Stradale. I'm really excited about this video. There's a lot I want to show you and there's a lot I want to cover, and especially why it's such a better design compared to the F8 Tributo. So as I said, there's a lot to cover, so let's jump in. As I'm sure you know, this is Ferrari's first series production hybrid electric vehicle, and the car seems to fill a space I didn't know existed between the F8 Tributo and the LaFerrari hypercar. Here are some key numbers of the SF90. It has 1,000 horsepower, 590 pound-feet of torque, a weight to power ratio of 3.5 pounds or 1.6 kilo per horsepower, 860 pounds or 390 kilos of downforce at 155 miles per hour. And these numbers mean that the V8 is the top of the range Ferrari model for the first time ever. The power comes from a 780 horsepower 90-degree V8 engine, the most powerful V8 Ferrari has ever produced. And as if this wasn't powerful enough, you also have 3 electric motors delivering the remaining 220 horsepower. You have 1 motor in the rear and then you have 2 in the front. 0 to 60 miles per hour takes only 2.5 seconds, and 0 to 120 miles per hour is completed in a ridiculous 6.7 seconds thanks to a brand new 8-speed dual clutch automatic transmission. So what about the design of the SF90 Stradale? To me, there is no question, this car is so much better looking than the F8. And as always, I'm not just going to spit out an opinion without explaining myself, so let me show you why the design of the SF90 here is on a different level than the F8. In addition to that, I'm also going to show you what I don't really like about the SF90 here and what I wish Ferrari would have kept from the F8 design. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little redesign of the graphics of the SF90. Now, I've already made a detailed design review and shared my thoughts on the F8 Tributo. You can go and check that video out by clicking up here in the corner, and I think it might be useful to go and watch that first to get a better understanding of where I'm coming from here. To put it bluntly, I really don't think that the F8 Tributo should have been created in the first place. I think Ferrari should have stuck with its absolutely gorgeous 488 and the Pista, skipped the F8 and then went straight to the SF90. The most beautiful of them all is the original Ferrari 458 Italia. When I say original, I mean the original with these types of proportions. You have the 458, you have the 488, the F8, and now the SF90, and they all have a very similar silhouette and proportions. And the design of the 458 Italia are those proportions in their cleanest, most elegant form. The F8 simply lacks the elegance and grace of what Ferrari is. It's just too messy, it's too many lines being disturbed too often. I feel Ferrari knows this too, since they went back to proper Ferrari lines here with the SF90. So let me show you in Photoshop exactly what I mean. So here we have, of course, the F8 Tributo in a straight front view. And what I think about this car is that honestly, it feels kind of sloppy for Ferrari. It feels like it lacks a line flow. And to me, what Ferrari is all about is a beautiful, harmonious body lines that flows into each other and creates this beautiful sculpture. And here, there are too many lines that are either broken up or disturbed, or there are too many lines that are undefined and curvatures that don't really make sense. And I'm gonna show you this and compare this with the SF90, and when I show you the SF90, everything is going to make a lot more sense what I'm saying here. But basically what I mean here, let's look at some details. I mean these curvatures here. For example, this surface here, I don't know what's going on there. There is some weird bend or something that bends and then goes into these headlights right here. And then you have this line that is broken up and then continues this way and creates some sort of chamfer underneath the headlights. And then you have some very subtle curvature on the fins here as well. and you have very soft edges all around here. There is no sharpness and no definition to these curves. Same with this curve right here. It's kind of hard to tell what they really want to do with this curvature. It just goes in here and you have different radiuses all over the place. And on top of that, you have this rectangle up here that is, I guess, an air intake. But to me, it looks like part of the headlight is actually missing. It looks like it wasn't well thought through how to add that air intake there. If you look at the 458, it's a lot more subtle, and it's a lot better integration in the rest of the design with that specific air intake there. But here it just looks messy because it has just a rectangle like that, and the headlight just abruptly stops there. It's weird to me that Ferrari actually came out with this design. So I'm going to show you this and compare it to the SF90, both in front view and then side view and then rear view, of course, so all around the car. So now let's have a look at the SF90 here. And look how much they cleaned up the design, going from the F8 in the top down to the SF90 in the bottom. And all of a sudden we have this beautiful flow back again that I thought they would implement in the F8 as well. But it seems like they took in some other designers for the F8. But then going back to the SF90, you can see that everything becomes a lot more calm and a lot more Ferrari, a lot more line flow that actually makes sense on the car. It's like they took the F8 and they looked at every single detail of the car, the intakes right here, this center portion of the car, and all this messy lines right here, and they thought, how can we make this integrate better in the design, and how can we make this more Ferrari? And that's exactly what they did here. I mean, just look at this portion right here. If we zoom in on this part on both these cars, you can see that the SF90 is so much more elegant, and elegance is what Ferrari is all about. It's not a Lamborghini. This is more like a Lamborghini style styling of the car, but here they went back to the classic Ferrari line flow and elegance in their design. Let's talk about the side view comparing the F8 Tributo to the SF90. And the F8 Tributo here that we have on top, it's probably the best view of the F8 is the side view, because it reminds me a lot of the 458, which is one of my favorite Ferraris of all time, and it's a very beautiful car. But here I'm going to show you the F8 and then the SF90 again, and you're gonna see that the SF90 makes a lot more sense when it comes to the styling, and specifically when it comes to Ferrari styling. This feels a bit forced. It feels, for example, you have this big air intake here, or inlet in the side of the car, and it feels like someone just took a spoon and just carved out that line. And you can see that it doesn't really flow well, because we have this line right here that also feels forced, because there are two strong radiuses going around the wheel arch in the back. The silhouette is still the same as the 458. There's not a lot of big differences here, but the problem is when you start looking at the graphic design of the F8. The same thing with the front here, it's too messy. Comparing this now to the SF90 down here in the bottom, you can see that everything, same thing with the front view, everything starts to make more sense. And you even have a different greenhouse here. This looks almost like a cockpit or something, and I love that it looks like it's coming out of this red portion of the car that wraps around the rear part of the greenhouse. And you can also see how subtle this air intake is integrated in the car compared to the F8 Tributo here, which feels forced. It's kind of like you have a nice sculpture and then you just have someone carve out a massive piece of it that shouldn't be there. And this feels so much more integrated in the design, and you have this subtle wave of the door line, and also have this beautiful line that sticks up like this and goes wrapping around the top of the car as well. And we also don't have these forced lines around the rear wheel arch right here, because here we have a simple shoulder line like this that is classic Ferrari. It's timeless, and it's a lot more elegant than the F8 Tributo. Alright, so now we're coming to the big deal with the F8 Tributo here, and that is, in my opinion, the rear view. I said I made a design review of the F8 already, where I talk in detail about this, but the rear is where I think Ferrari really messed up with the F8 Tributo, and there is a simple reason for this, and it's all about the graphic part of the design. It makes it look wobbly. It makes it look unstable, and the reason for that is because we have these black parts right here sticking up like this, as you can see. The same thing on this side, of course. And in the middle we have this big red piece with the base being more narrower than the top. So what that does, it creates this upside down pyramid. If you break this down into a simple geometry, and then I'm going to show you the SF90, of course, and you're going to see the completely different approach to that. But first, when we break this down into a simple geometry, we have the baseline is down here. So the middle of the baseline is right there. And then we have these top corners here. We're going to follow this red graphic, which becomes something like this if we break it down to a simple geometric shape. It's an upside down pyramid, and what this does is that it feels like it's balancing on this part, which makes the whole rear end wobbly, and it feels weak. It feels like it doesn't have enough structure on the sides down here to support this massive red part that is the center of the car. And then there is nothing to break it up here in the middle as well, either, so you don't have any black outlets or graphics in the design to help kind of take away some of that weight that the rear deck lid has on the rear end here. So now let's compare it to the SF90 and let's see what they did here. So it's like they made the complete opposite approach for the SF90. You have these solid bars that holds up everything to start with. You see that the stance here is going down right here instead of going up like they do on the F8. So that's the big difference that they did with the SF90, is that they planted the car visually when it comes to the graphics. And let's break this car down in a simple geometry as well. To start with, you have these two pillars that is holding up everything in the rear of the SF90, and then you have this strong graphic in the middle, which is the black bar right here, which actually opens up at certain speeds, and that also breaks up the mass that is the big red part right here on the F8, and it makes the car, it makes the rear graphics of the car of the SF90 look lighter, and that is of course supported by these two beams here. And then if we go into the graphics here, we have almost the complete opposite when it comes to the F8 Tributo here. We have a proper triangle that is the correct way with a solid base that in turn is supported by these two massive beams here that graphically are these air outlets in the rear of the car. And this creates a very powerful stance looking at it from the rear, and it doesn't look as top heavy as the F8 Tributo, and that all comes down to the graphic design of the rear of the car. So with that said, there are a few things that I would like to play around with the SF90 here, especially in the rear. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take this rear view of the SF90, redesign it, and let's see how that is going to turn out. thought that I wanted to add the F8 Tributo's rear lights onto the SF90, which would have been cool, probably would have made it into more of a production version of the SF90. But, you know, then I thought it would be so much cooler to have some sort of lights in this black bar that hides in the body, inside of the body of the car. So when it's turned off, all you see is this black strip in the middle in combination with these graphics on the side, which creates a very stanced look of the car. And when you turn it on, you can see these rear lights just come to life within the car. I think that would be really cool to see. Not sure if that would make it into production because these rear lights are really tiny. But then at the same time, if you look at the SF90 original, the original rear lights are very tiny as it is, so this might probably work. Also, another thing I wanted to focus on here is to give it just a little bit more definition in the rear bumper. So I added these creases to define the rear bumper a bit more and have them follow this pretty dominant graphic that goes into each side of the car. Last but not least, I want to center the Cavallino Rampante to have it be in the middle of the car and not have the head of the car just cover part of the black bar there. So what I did was just move it up just a few inches, and I think that looks a lot better. Thank you so much for watching. I'm TheSketchMonkey. I will see you in the next video.